the fascinating link between the pyramids and otherworldly visitors. This is by Alexander Light. Humans are free. Let's keep in mind the Abydos Temple, the hieroglyphs of the Temple of Seti, the hieroglyphs of the airplanes, helicopters, spaceships, submarines, hieroglyphs that were made thousands of years before Christ, and which meant that these vehicles, these spaceships, these craft were seen and were used, most likely. Now he says here, I've always been fascinated by Egyptian pyramids, and as a kid I wasn't even aware of the many other types of pyramids that existed on this planet, their significance or incredible history. All I knew of were huge yellowish-orange triangular Egyptian pyramids that gave me a sense of wonder and amazement about our past. Who built them? How were they built? Why were they built? Could it have been ETs? It was all so fascinating to me. And as I was doing research for an article I wrote about anomalies with the Great Pyramid that Graham Hancock outlines, I came across a number of interesting aspects to the pyramids that not only lined up with space, but that also suggest there may have been beings in our history that knew things far beyond what we humans apparently knew at the time. Otherworldly connections. According to the accepted version of history, the three massive pyramids on the Giza plateau in Egypt were built by armies of Hebrew slaves for the glory of the pharaohs of Egypt. This idea was introduced to the world by the visit to Egypt of the 5th century Greek historian Herodotus. He claimed that the pyramids were built by teams of 100,000 men, changed every few months over a period of 20 years. The fact that this meant that one block of stone had to be laid exactly in place every 3.5 minutes, 24 hours a day, seems to have been overlooked by recent Egyptologists. The fact that there wasn't this kind of manpower in the 4th dynasty of Egypt for almost 5,000 miles around is equally ignored. Not to mention the ludicrous theories about the stones being rolled on logs when the only trees endemic to ancient Egypt were date palms, a valuable food source so unlikely to be cut, and far too soft a wood to withstand the weight of such stones for more than a few feet. Or pushed up a ramp which would have entailed more work than the construction of the pyramid itself, and would have left behind around 6 billion pounds of construction garbage, none of which has ever been found. The pyramids are supposed to be monuments to the pharaohs, tombs to preserve the royal bodies for a continued existence in the afterlife, and yet no bodies have ever been found inside them. So this misconception of history has led to some very basic misunderstandings about Egyptian culture and history, and has led to perhaps the greatest conspiracy of all time as to who built the pyramids. So let's start by examining some hard facts about pyramids and in turn look at what these facts might represent or mean. Number 1, the Great Pyramid, known as that of Khufu or Cheops, contains no pharaoh's body, no treasure chamber, and no treasures. There's no indication that it ever has contained these things. The popular myth of the pyramids being royal tombs is clearly nonsense, and the tombs archaeology has accepted, those in the valleys of the kings and queens, are obviously tombs, storehouses of the pharaoh's earthly riches, intricately prepared to ensure his survival in the next world. The Great Pyramid contains none of the obvious trappings of a tomb. 2. The only reason it's known as the Khufu Cheops Pyramid at all is due to some Victorian graffiti. When Colonel Howard Vyse blasted his way into the Great Pyramid, he was determined to make his name as an Egyptologist. He longed for nothing more than to make some monumental discovery which would make him famous. His disappointment at finding the pyramid empty was too much for him to bear. It was his last season in Egypt, and in the dead of night it is said that he crept up into the air shaft, known as Spirit Stones to the Egyptians, above the king's chamber and daubed some hieroglyphics in red paint. The following morning he made his discovery, quote-unquote, and subsequently earned his place in the history books as being the man who discovered the identity of the owner of the Great Pyramid. It's worth mentioning in addition that the symbols he painted were not even accurate ones, for the period in which the pyramid was even believed to have been built. The symbol for Ra, chief among the Egyptian gods at the time, was depicted wrongly. Now surely, if an Egyptian had painted that symbol, he would have got it right. Not to do so would have been a grave insult to the most highly respected and feared of the Egyptian pantheon. Number 3. The stone sarcophagus which contained within the Great Pyramid is too large to have been brought into the chamber in which it stands. Many books on the subject of this particular anomaly either point blank ignore the question or state rather bizarrely that the sarcophagus must have been installed during the building process. Now surely, to a civilization as advanced as that of the ancient Egyptians, this solution would have never made any sense. So if the reason for making the sarcophagus, which incidentally shows no indication of ever having been occupied, larger than the doorway was to put off thieves, surely the subsequent sealing of the chamber with huge stone portcullis blocks, and the thorough blocking off of the ascending corridor which leads to the king's chamber by 3 enormous granite plugs would have been sufficient. It's highly unlikely that the opportunistic thieves of ancient Egypt would have taken the time to plow through that much solid rock just to get into a chamber which they must have known was empty of all riches. And if the chamber was completely barren and empty, why go to such great lengths to ensure it was not opened up ever again? What secrets does the so-called king's chamber hold? Number 4. Some visitors, including the great and fearless Emperor Napoleon of France himself, have experienced strange visions and environmental distortions while inside the Great Pyramid, particularly the King's Chamber. In the 1930s, author Paul Brunton spent a night there and was assailed by visions of, quote, a circle of hostile creatures, unquote, which he likened to elemental creatures, creations, grotesque shapes, madmen, hulking, and devilish apparitions. Was this mere hallucination? In more recent times, such ideas have been put down to the background radiation given off by the black granite of the chamber, but surely if it was that simple, then everyone who visited the chamber would experience a similar thing, wouldn't they? Early experiments indicated that the king's chamber's spirit stones, quote-unquote, did seem to generate an electrical field which caused minor shock to at least one poor visitor drinking from a metal hip flask. It has been suggested that the pyramid, because of its granite blocks, could transmit and receive radio and even microwave signals very well, and some believe it gives off energy in an emanating apex. This means that the energy spirals off the top of the structure in a circle which widens as it permeates the atmosphere. While some have seen this as mere New Age hokum, others have said this confirms their suspicion that the pyramid is some kind of beacon intended for use from space. More recently, ex-NASA consultant Richard Hoagland has stated that radioactive sand was found in a chamber behind the Queen's chamber, which might explain both the weird experiences of Napoleon and his company and the anomalous radioactive date readings given by the pyramid, in which it appears that the top of the structure is 1,000 years older than the bottom. How is that possible? The top is older than the bottom? This has led some people to speculate that the pyramid was constructed upside down in midair by alien technology and then swung over in place on the Giza Plateau. I could not possibly comment on this. Number 5. A road 8 feet wide and 4 inches thick could be built from San Francisco to New York and put inside the Great Pyramid. It has also been speculated that a wall 3 feet high and 1 foot thick could be built all the way around France with the amount of stone it took to build the Great Pyramid. Its perimeter is almost 1 kilometer, and the inside area, a massive 53,000 square meters, would be able to incorporate the cathedrals of Florence, Milan, and St. Peter's of the Vatican, as well as Westminster Abbey and St. Paul's, and this was accomplished by people of the Stone Age, yes? Number 6. They are the sole remnants of the 7 wonders of the world. The pyramids are also, apart from the Great Wall of China, the oldest surviving artificial structures on Earth. Number 7. There are no true hieroglyphic markings inside the pyramids, remarkable for a nation which carved them into just about every available surface they had. Nor are there any real clues from hieroglyphs elsewhere as to how the pyramids were built. The only hieroglyphs inside the Great Pyramid are the red paint daubings of Howard Weiss and are not genuine ancient Egyptian carvings. Although pyramids elsewhere in Egypt, most notably those of a much later date than the pyramids of Giza, do contain hieroglyphs, the derivation of the so-called pyramid texts, the Great Pyramid and its two accompanying companions of the Giza Plateau are untouched by the scribe's knife. Number 8. As Giza Pyramid investigator August Turnquist states, quote, "The Great Pyramid was the greatest single undertaking in the whole history of mankind, and yet there is not one picture or drawing, not one artifact, not one inventory or tally sheet to tell us of its construction. The Egyptians left us some 3,000 years of written and pictorial history, covering virtually everything that happened in their culture, from babies being born to plowing and harvesting, building, weaving, sacrificing, praying, embalming, but nothing about the pyramids of Giza. Why? For a nation that loved to boast, they seem strangely reticent to tell us anything about the pyramids of Giza. Perhaps the reason was simply because they were as much a mystery to the ancient Egyptians as they are to us. There is, in fact, documentary evidence from Sumerian clay tablets, unearthed in the Great Historical Library of Nineveh, that the Great Pyramid was known to the Sumerians of 10,000 years ago, 6,000 years before the first pharaoh of Egypt was ever born. Number 9, it's built to face true north, supposedly at a time when such computations could not have been possible. Are we to believe that the ancient Egyptians, on top of all their other wonders, were also the first civilization to possess knowledge of mathematics so precise that they could determine true north from magnetic north? Come to that, are we to believe that they could even find magnetic north or know what its significance was? Tied in with this idea of being able to locate true north is the notion that the earth is round, a fact not generally accepted until the last few centuries. Some still dispute it even today. Number 10, the Great Pyramid is located at the exact center of the Earth's landmass. That is, its east-west axis corresponds to the longest land parallel across the Earth, passing through Africa, Asia, and America. Similarly, the longest land meridian on Earth through Asia, Africa, Europe, and Antarctica also passes right through the pyramid. Since the Earth was enough land area to provide 3 billion possible building sites for the pyramid, the odds of having been built where it was are 1 to 3 billion. As previously discussed on my article on anomalous maps, the ability to compute longitude was not supposedly available to cartographers or anybody else until the 18th century. Without an understanding of longitude, it would be exceptionally difficult to be able to pinpoint the size, shape, and relative mappings of the Earth's land masses and the seas. Without longitude, it would have been nearly impossible to undertake major sea journeys, and yet if the evidence, such as Egyptian mummies, contained cocaine traces, is reliable, the Egyptians did actually undertake such temporary, exemplary, exploratory missions even as far south as South America, the only place the cocaine could have come from. South America. All this despite their apparent hatred of sailing the open seas. And even if we accept that the Egyptians of thousands of years ago were competent navigators, how could they have known about the exact interrelation of the rest of the Earth's land masses? And then there are the statistics. 11. Like 20th century bridge designs, the Great Pyramid's cornerstones have balls and sockets built into them. Several football fields along, the pyramid is subject to movements of expansion and contraction from heat and cold, as well as earthquakes, settling, and other such phenomena. After 4,600 years, its structure would have been significantly damaged without such construction. Recent construction experts called in to offer suggestions as to how the pyramid could have been built, make reference to the settle factor of any large building. They have publicly stated that while the acceptable settle factor of a modern skyscraper is 6 inches per 100 years, the simple fact is that the pyramid, using more construction material than 35 Empire State Buildings, has settled less than half an inch in 5,000 years. Modern construction has also averted that although for a large modern tower block, the acceptable variance from complete alignment of all 4 sides is 6 inches, the 4 sides of the pyramid are out of perfect alignment by only less than 1/4 of an inch. The casing stones, 144,000 in all, were so brilliant that they could literally be seen from the mountains of Israel hundreds of miles away. For those interested in possible symbolic significance, in Bible prophecy, 144,000 is the number of people, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, who are supposed to evangelize the world in the days before the apocalypse. The outside surface stones are cut to within 0.01 inch of perfectly straight and at nearly perfect right angles for all 6 sides, and they were placed together with a gap between them of only 0.02 inches. Modern technology cannot place such 20-ton stones with greater accuracy than those in the pyramid. As already noted above, the variance from perfect alignment seen in the pyramid is still something which is unattainable today. What can we deduce from all these facts? That whoever built the pyramids used a technology that we still do not possess today to cut, move, and cement stones. Whoever built it also had some considerable knowledge of the earth, because they were built in one of the few locations with a strong enough bedrock to support the great weight. The builders also knew where the greatest landmass of the earth was in both north, south, east, and west directions. After studying the detailed measurements made by the investigators before him, Sir Isaac Newton, who was fascinated by the pyramids, recognized that many key measurements would be in round numbers if the standard unit of measurement was only just 0.001 inch, 1/1000th, larger than the British inch, which happens to be the sacred Jewish inch. The sacred Jewish inch is 1/25th of a cubit, equals 1.00106 British inches. This discovery allowed the secrets of the pyramids to be unlocked and revealed unmistakable and mathematical relationships. For instance, we know from geometry that there is a universal relationship between the diameter of a circle and its circumference. Consider this: the height of the pyramid's apex is 5,812.98 inches, and each side is 9,131 inches from corner to corner in a straight line. If the circumference of the pyramid is divided by twice its height, the diameter of a circle is twice the radius. The result is 3.14159, which just happens to be pi. Incredibly, this calculation is accurate to 6 digits. So the pyramid is a square circle, and thus pi was designed into it 4,600 years ago. Pi is demonstrated many times throughout the pyramid. B. Other numbers are also repeated throughout. Each of the Great Pyramid's 4 walls, when measured, is a straight line, are 9,131 inches, for a total of 36,524 inches. At first glance, this number may not seem significant, but move the decimal point over and you get 365.24. Modern science has shown us. Science has shown us that the exact length of the solar year is 365.24 days. That's amazing. But we still go on. Item C, the average height of land above sea level, Miami being below and the Himalayas being high, as can be measured only by modern day satellites and computers, appears to be 5,449 inches. That's the exact height of the pyramid. D, all 4 sides of the pyramid are very slightly and evenly bowed in or concave. This effect, which cannot be detected by looking at the pyramid from the ground, was discovered around 1940 by a pilot taking aerial photos to check certain measurements. As measured by today's laser instruments, all of these perfectly cut and intentionally bowed stone blocks duplicate exactly the curvature of the earth. The radius of this bow is equal to the radius of the Earth. And this radius of curvature is what Newton had long been seeking. All this has led many to see the pyramids, particularly the Great Pyramid, as being built by visitors from another planet, since the technology was obviously not such as would have been available to Stone Age man. The theorists speculate that the pyramid is a message, a symbol of knowledge which we as early humans learned to decipher, and hence built our own version of the pyramid, examples of which litter the Egyptian desert plateau in crumbling ruins. This message indicates that whoever built the pyramids knew the earth well. The length of the year, the radius of curvature, the standard measurements techniques, the average height of the continents, and the center of the landmass. They were able to construct something that we still cannot construct today, and they were able to tie all these things together in this single structure. Were they extraterrestrial, or perhaps even supernatural? Some people think so, but you can be the judge. This is by Joe Martino, guest author on Humans Are Free. Tell me what you think about this. This is amazing. Whoever built the pyramid obviously had really advanced technology and knowledge of the whole of the earth, and also put in spiritual numbers, 144,000. The exact length of the year. This is amazing. The height of the pyramid. Universal relationship. It's just amazing. Anyway, tell me what you think. Besides of the fact that it was aligned to Orion's belt, that's something else. It's amazing. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.